This is Rue Ziegler, and I'm interviewing Tom May. It is November 12, 2008, and this is tape number 2 of the oral history series of Tom May for the Jack Davies Agricultural Preservation Fund.
Where were we when we left off? I can't remember the sentence I left
off. So we were...
Oh, that's right, finding out what we were doing, what I was doing in all this. There was a very dramatic meeting at one of the schools in Napa, in which I presented to the assembled multitudes a stack of books, which was about 2 feet high, to demonstrate the amount of research that had been put in on this field and what the county had done for research. And I took each volume and read the title and an opening sentence of it and said, and this is the report of, and then slap it on the table. And so by the time I was through with waving my arms around and these things, it was about 2 feet high, all for the cause of the preservation idea and why it was such a good idea.
And were some of these studies showing that agriculture could actually be
it was better agriculture than what was coming or potentially coming.
Yes, that it could be an economic engine.
And yes, that's right. That land could be very valuable as agriculture, and housing doesn't necessarily pay for itself because of all the added services.
And did you find that there was a lot of contentiousness at this meeting?
Yes, but it wasn't. People were, I won't say hostile, but there was the pros and the cons, and just sort of, you knew which side people were on, whether they glared or smiled at you, and.
Was somebody moderating these meetings,
yes,
or how did they keep people from just talking at the same time?
I don't recall how that. I think it was supervisors or a group of the county people and someone like Jack or someone from the preserve group standing and saying, this is what we have to say. Or, there was back and forth on the thing. But I'm not, my recollection isn't that good. It wasn't a fisticuffs or anything. It was very...
it wasn't a free-for-all.
Free-for-all, blessedly. At least I don't remember one. But I think some of the real sadness was that that families were divided, and that because we were newcomers, Martha was positively ostracized in the markets, and Selena, knowing that she was on the wrong side, that people wouldn't talk to her.
Really?
Yeah. And obviously she wasn't the only one that was being treated that way.
No.
So it was that kind of hostility, though, that was very definitely everywhere. And you almost had to see what side of the street you were on. It was kind of sad and nasty at times. People felt so strongly and insulting people. One of the persons that I remember was... can't think of his name now. I can't give it to you. I'll come back to it. He was very pro the old timers, but he told you exactly where he was coming from and why. He was so open about it. He wasn't hiding anything. It wasn't a hidden agenda for him. Because I just hated his guts because of where he stood, but as was pointed out by several people, he said, well, at least you know where he stands, and yet so-and-so and so-and-so, they're not really telling you what they're thinking or what they're covering themselves one way by sounding so good in another way. You know? Oh, I know, it was Mr. Strala, Louis Strala.
Oh, yes.
He was a character. I didn't realize he was a gangster too, but related to a gangster. But he was just so open about what was going on and what he thought about the whole thing.
He was related to a gangster?
The Strala that ran the gambling casinos off the Santa Monica at the end of Prohibition, I believe. So his connections were in that direction. And I think that was his brother. I'm not positive. So,
But anyway, he was very forthcoming
Yeah.
and transparent.
yeah. And, so you had to like him for his honesty. I mean, you didn't like his politics.
Did you find then that a lot of people were keeping things very close to the vest in terms of their?
Yeah, some people were kind of, well, it's not saying, oh, good work, but you knew damn well they were lying. But and I guess after the fact, there were several people who had commented on how wonderful the preserve was, and how that we, meaning them and me, had done so much for it. I knew damn well they were completely on the other side. I thought, you lousy so-and-sos. Now you know which way this thing is sailing, and it's been successful, and you are making money off it. Which that makes me think of, I believe it was one of the families, was the Wheatley family, that the Trefethens had bought their property. I think they bought 3 families worth of property, but I'm not sure of that. But they were very anti the preserve until Mr. Trefethen bought them, and then they suddenly thought the preserve was the best thing that ever hit the Napa Valley. And of course, that's my line of thinking. The Trefethens are sainted by proving in a big way that this was a financially viable thing to do, that people were nutty enough to buy this farmland and pay a fancy price for it. That I don't think that they even fancied they were going to get selling it off for lots, for ranchettes. And it was right down next to Napa too. It wasn't up in the hills where nobody could see it.
But they could see, in other words, that you could get a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
Without subdividing.
Well, subdivided. The ranch was just changed hands. I mean, there was going to be no housing, no nothing. It was more ranch. I think a lot of walnuts went out for grapes, but I'm not even sure how that. I mean, that's beside the point of the. And then several other sales of modest size helped prove it too.
Now, so Martha was equally involved in your efforts?
Yeah, not quite so loudly at meetings and so on, but she went to them, and by that time we had young'uns, so it was a little harder for her to get away. Yeah.
Yes, now you have 2 children?
3.
3. And when were they born?
65, 7, and 9.
So you had very young children.
Yeah. And our oldest is a Downs, which added another layer of care, which complicated our lives a little bit.
Oh, goodness, yes.
And so
that was hard for her,
yeah.
Of course. How long were you then active? Once the ordinance was passed, then did everything quiet down, or? Yeah,
I think that was, the job is done. Although I do remember a sort of a hurrah meeting. I'd like to say it was at the college, right? That doesn't sound right. When it was in Napa, where they got Secretary of the Interior Udall to come and congratulate us on what we'd done, which he did a very nice job. But he made a wonderful statement at the end. He said, "Just remember, though, what you've done and worked for, but it's in the record, and the state and people in the real estate industry don't forget, and they're going to come back at you. So watch that. That's eternal vigilance on what you're doing. It's not all done." I thought that was a wonderful warning, and that also was, I think also that Peter Bear at that time had hoodwinked, is the wrong word, had persuaded the state legislature to remove from the Caltrans map of freeways any freeways in Napa County. And he'd done it quite legally, but when Caltrans realized what had happened, that they had been caught, not going to be able to pave their way up here. The word got out, we're not going to do anything in Napa County we can avoid for as long as possible. In other words, you guys are going to be paying for this for a long time.
Huh.
And I think we are. I think a lot of things don't get done in this county because it's on the Caltrans blacklist.
And who was Peter Bear?
He was the representative for Marin, Sonoma, and this part of Napa County. He was a Marin person and very conservation oriented. He was quite outstanding in conservation work. He was in the legislature.
So he was a state legislator?
Yeah.
Legislator. So in his last name, just for the...
B-E-H-R.
B-E-H-R for the transcriber. Well, that is a very interesting story. So who do you remember the most that you worked with during this time?
Well, as I say, Jack Davies was the most obvious one. Looking at the list that you presented me with, I can't say that I worked with more or less any of these people. I mean, actually, Laurie Wood had been doing some vineyard work for us, so he was there. Lowell Eddington is the local resident. I saw him at the post office, but I don't remember anything specific about him. Chuck Carpy, yes, I guess, yeah, the Carpys, I think we were sufficiently close friends to them, so it was back and forth talking about what's going on. Dorothy Erskine, we knew was a very conservation-oriented person, had done other work in this county in that direction. I see that they misspelled Nathan Fay's name. We knew Nathan Fay casually, more as a grower than that ordinance.
Rather than the work on the ordinance.
Yeah, and I see Joe Heitz's name here. I don't remember, other than the fact he must have agreed on the situation, that it.
So, Tom, we were talking about whether you remember any of these people, either on this list or this one.
Now, let me take a look at I recognize lots of names. I mean, not many of the names, but I don't remember, working particularly closely with any of them on this at this point.
What about Warren Winiarski?
Yes, but I don't remember it being particular working together on a project or whatever. I mean, there seemed to be an awful lot of dashing around with a map or an idea or coming up with new information. And from this point of view, I don't remember.
Now, and so
we have a neighbor at that time, Doug Stelling, and his sister, and he wanted to be part of what was going on, and the sadness was that he and his sister's estate was run by some trustees in San Francisco, all of them realtors. And somehow their mother had tied up the estate that they could not say anything about it until they were 35, and he was then 20. And it's a good reason to give your children, even if it's throwing it away, let them throw it away. Don't let somebody else make money off it. Well, anyway, but we tried to work with him a little bit, but he had no way to get at them, because they were doing exactly what all the other people were. It's a piece of real estate that they were going to sell off in pieces. And they did, more or less, in big pieces, but
and he couldn't.
He couldn't say a thing, which is very sad. And the same with his sister. They got thrown out of their house and when they got a little older, I mean, the whole thing was a mess. Anyway, let's see, back to
But now when the egg preserve was passed, they couldn't subdivide
No, it was
anymore.
No,
Then
no, it was passed. And, you're quite correct.
and then it was stopped. Do you remember Volker Isley?
Ah, yes, the sainted Volker. Yes, he is still working on. He's the what do we call it? The lone outpost. I think for years. I don't know how that guy has done it. It's just unbelievable. He is wonderful and so. I guess patient and just pushing along. Everyone laughs when Volker gets up, but he's right. He's right on.
Do you remember very much of Jim Hickey during this period?
Other than the fact that he was the county and a very good representative, and I kind of got to know him after all. He continued to be with the county for a number of years, it seems to me. So going to other kinds of meetings for the supervisors or things that he had to deal with, I got to know him, maybe not so very personally. I mean, I just could say hello to him or chat a little bit with him and his wife when we see him someplace. And I think it was he who was one of the spark plugs that made the damn thing work. And I really think he...
And then he authored the general plan, which reinforced the concept of the egg preserve over the next number of years. Were you sort of surprised at the extent to which you got involved in the community, or you hadn't had any sort of experience before?
No, but when you get old enough to take care of yourself and have interests and ideas, you got to get up there and and put your mouth and your money together, or just do things. If you're going to make a community work, you've got to help each other. I think that was, and I think the farming community and the vineyard and winery community at that time was so small that almost everyone knew everyone else, and the kind of helping the neighbor feeling about things. I could call up any of those people with a dumb question. I've never seen a bug like this. Now what do I do? And if they didn't have an answer, they said, well, why don't you call so-and-so? They live down your area, and see what you can find out. I mean, there was no kind of secrets about things, and we didn't have to depend on particularly, but I know that people were lending each other equipment all the time, and particularly in the spring when everyone was beginning to disc and the disc broke down. Can we borrow yours? Or well, as soon as you're through, can I have it for an afternoon? And it was just, everyone was sure, do what you need to do attitude. And so very friendly and helpful. If we don't pull, I'm trying to think of what the Ben Franklin said, if we don't all haul together, we get hauled off or something. And it was so small. I think it was very friendly attitude towards everything.
And you were completely green in terms of being
absolutely one of the idiots that didn't know what they were doing, and more of them keep floating in. I still don't know what I'm doing. But.
And so, who did you say was managing your vineyard during this
time?
That was Laurie Woods?
Well, by then I had a fellow by the name of Mac McCord who had been managing the vineyard across the creek from us, which was then part of the Krug holdings. And the Krug people had, I believe, divvied off some of the land to somebody else, and so he needed some other local, it was right next door, so it was easy to farm it, and so he farmed it for a number of years.
And of course, from the get-go, all of your grapes went to Heights.
Yes, but that was, more or less, Barney Rhodes was because I asked Barney who I ought to sell them to, or how I should do it. And he had some very interesting pointers about what to do or not to do for the size of vineyard I had. And one of the things that he had suggested, because he was sharp enough to know what was going to come out of there, he said, you ought to go to a small winery if you can. And part of the deal is that you, whether or not they're going to mix the wine, ask for a large number of gallons to be saved out of it every year that is unblended for your own household, which of course is a nuisance for bookkeeping and so on, but that would be part of the payment, would be to get that held out. Well, after the second year, there was no question about that, because the Heights did it anyway.
Were you quite stunned at the success?
Yes, quite. But it was we still are stunned that people give a hoot about it. Why do people get so excited about this? I mean, that's just another vineyard. But and then people meet Martha. Oh, there is a Martha's Vineyard. To which my answer is, no, it isn't Aunt Jemima or Betty Crocker, really.
Well, it is considered the most famous vineyard in Napa County.
Well, that's kind of hard to believe that people get that excited over another vineyard, but it seems to work. So, but we don't like a lot of PR. I mean, that's fine. The whale that spouts gets harpooned, so we keep a low profile. Well, I don't know if you remember the Zodiac killer that was in full form. Our kids were growing up, and there had been some terrible murders in Santa Cruz County. A whole family was wiped out by some hippie types one time. They just decided it'd be fun to shoot up a family, a dentist, his wife, and 3 children. And then the Zodiac, which they never caught, kept the newspapers going for weeks on what he was about to do, including finding a school bus and shooting out the tires and then shoot the children one at a time. I mean, it made wonderful headlines, but it was time for us to keep our heads down and not let on that anyone was doing anything.
Not attract attention to
yourselves.
yourselves.
Not attract attention of any kind. Yeah, the Santa Cruz County ones seem to be the people who seem to be of some more than casual success. A fancy gate out front or a new house on the hill kind of thing. So, and we certainly qualified for that, the new house on the hill, but you'll notice it. You don't notice it until you get here.
Well, now, did things quiet down in the county soon after the ordinance was actually passed?
My memory is it was until, I believe it was Bill Yeager took the county to court on the thing, which I found very sad and rather obscene. He, being a newcomer, we thought we were friends with that family, make such a fuss over the whole thing. Well, he had lots of land that he was going to do what he wanted to do with, and it was spoiling his plan as far as I could figure out. Unfortunately, he lost the case.
But he was one of the leaders of the...
He didn't come up in my radar